I think all of us as brand leaders and activists need to strive for not just incremental competing for trivial differences in market share and product attributes. We should be thinking about how we can build brands that are worthy of emulation. Not just at an African level, but global businesses and brands need to be looking to the continent and say, there's a brand there. That Vodacom is doing things that are worthy of emulation. And that's certainly my aspiration for what we need to try and do and deliver in this organization. But I also think that a lot more brands on this beautiful continent can, and why not? We need to believe that we can build and create businesses and brands that are worthy of emulation, but also at a personal level, how do we think about what that means for us and the transformation we need to make in our personal lives? Go!
Welcome, guys. My name is Ntsubane, as you know, obviously, and I'm so excited. This is season 3, guys, and we continue to do this all the time. I'm taking a twist this year, and I'll tell you all about it. We're going to bring in still the CMOs from a client side and perspective. We want to bring in agency people and executives as well, and media buyers as well. So I'm excited, but without further ado, I want to introduce my guest today. My guest is the Chief Marketing Officer for Vodacom, Mr. Andisa Ntsubane. My good sir, how are you?
Ndongwa. And I'm the first one this year.
You're the first one. You're the opener. You're the opener. You're the opener. Thank you for joining.
Absolute pleasure. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm a big fan.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you so much. So the process of my podcast, which is what I would have told you, is that we start off with an icebreaker. And these are things I don't want you to prepare for. Just to get the...
Icebreakers?
Yeah, icebreakers, just to make sure that we lose and then we can get into the marketing things. So just entertain me.
All right.
The first things I say, I want you to respond. I don't want you to think long and hard about it. So first word that comes to mind, that's your response. So don't think too long. Nah? Okay, let's shoot. If there's any place in the world you could
Barcelona.
visit.
Barcelona, my happy place.
Okay, Nigerian jollof or Ghanaian jollof?
You're going to get me into trouble, yeah. Oh, Ghana. It's got to be Ghana. Oh, Ghanaian. The Nigerians are going to hate me.
Okay, cool. What are the 3 things you can't live without? 3 things.
Oh, good music, family. Oh, Barcelona.
My next question was going to be Real Madrid or Barcelona, but I think you've answered that. Now I know for sure.
Absolutely.
Okay, if you could describe yourself as any existing brand, which brand or product would it be?
Sure. Vodacom.
Smart man. Okay, cool. And the last one. I know you've been to 34 countries because I sat in your session after advertising week yesterday. And out of the 34 countries in the continent, which one was your favorite and why?
Oh, I've got so many favorites.
I know, that's why I'm asking you this question.
You know, I love each one of them for different things.
One, Andisa.
I love Ghana.
Okay.
Ghana's amazing. The first country to gain independence on the African continent. There's never been a civil war there. The people of Ghana are just amazing.
Yeah.
And something very interesting.
Yeah.
Every single person born in Ghana has a name according to the day of the week they are born. It is amazing.
Interesting.
Kofi, Kwame, Kwesi, it's the same names. And the ladies too have the same names. So it's fantastic.
Interesting. Okay, that's done. Icebreaker done.
Thank you.
You off the hook.
I'm broken in.
Cool. So I also like setting the context.
Yeah.
So I want you to like share from an upbringing perspective, very high level, who Andisa is, how you grew up, and how that shaped the man that you actually are today, and the work that you actually do today. Yeah,
so it's very interesting. I always tell people I had a very different life to most South Africans. People talk about apartheid South Africa in black or white. Yeah. And I had a very different upbringing. So in 1976, my family and I lived in Waterkloof in Pretoria in the suburbs. Yeah. In 1976, that's the year that Soweto was burning. And in 1982, I went to St. John's I was the first black boy at St. John's. So what's the problem with all of this? The problem is that black people weren't allowed in the suburbs back those days. And in fact, there were a thing called stayaways, where black people had to stay away from the suburbs, but we lived in the suburbs. So what were we doing there? And how come I was able to gain access to a private school in South Africa? And the reason we were there is my father was the ambassador of a country called Transkei. So the Eastern Cape was a country. And so I was the son of a diplomat. And that's why we lived in the embassy in Waterkloof. And that's how I was able to get access to St. John's. So very interesting, but also very difficult, because although people might think, wow, very awesome, I had a very difficult and lonely childhood because I kind of didn't fit in. I was the only black boy at the time, and as I went through the school, more black people came into the school. And also the white kids didn't want to play with me because I was the only one of my kind. I was very different. And black people didn't want to play with me because I was too white. So I had a very, I suppose, lonely childhood. Nobody wanted to play with me. We had one rule in our house at home, that is, don't go near the windows. Every week a brick was thrown through our windows. And it was a very difficult time. And I really journeyed through that. And as I went through the school, more came into the school, but also I got into sport. And sport was really powerful in creating that unity amongst different races and different cultures. And I thought that was where the beginning of the embracing of me kind of started happening. And interestingly, what happened was in 1986-7, my parents, Transkei was no more, so they went back to the Eastern Cape. And I stayed in boarding school at St. John's. And it was one of the things that really shaped my life. I learned independence. Boarding school is one of the greatest things that ever happened to me. And by then, lots had changed even within the school. And I'm really, really grateful for that experience and that journey. So that was really my upbringing. Very difficult, very different. Absolutely.
And then from St. John's, then you go into varsity.
That's correct.
And how then do you make your decision on which route to take, and how then do you end up in the world of marketing, which is what we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, so I mean, I was loving my youth actually by the end of it, loving high school. Involved in sports, vice captain of athletics, in rugby, in all the different sports. And then all of a sudden, I've got to make a decision about what career I want to choose. And at the time, doctors, engineers, there was nothing advertising, marketing. And so I made the decision of what I wanted to do based on what I saw on TV and what I really liked, and that was LA law. I used to watch the guys in fancy suits walking up and down the courtroom, strutting their stuff. And I thought that's a pretty interesting career. And so I went to UCT with the intention of doing a BA law and getting into law. Did my BA, and then I worked in a law firm in Cape Town called Balsilis. And I knew that this is definitely not me, because kind of the legal system is the legal system. Whereas I had a strong creative mind, and I wanted to come up with new ideas and challenge and create interesting solutions. And I left Cape Town, came back to Joburg, and after a while, no job, I got an opportunity to work on the first brand, and that brand is J&B. So worked on the J&B brand. We did some amazing things to really introduce the brand into a new market, and that's the black emerging middle market, and really helped to change perceptions of the whiskey category. And in the portfolio, there was Johnny Walker, there was Bell's, part of the Diageo group. And when I started there, I also started to kind of study it. So I went to Vega and did, brand management, had Gordon Cook there at the time. And it was just amazing to kind of get into this creative world where you actually come up with ideas, come up with solutions, and really innovate. And we did really amazing things to help build the brand in a new market in South Africa and create a category that actually was the entry-level brand into the whiskey portfolio. And that was really amazing experience. So that was really the journey. And then that kind of accelerated and kicked off my journey in my career. And I've been in multiple industries since then. I've been in FMCG, I've been in telco. So I was at Cell C in the beginning days. Cell C for yourself.
Are you responsible for that?
And that was amazing. So that was really great. And then left there, went to Standard Bank. Standard Bank was kind of my longest job. And that's where I really started to travel the continent of Africa. And going to different markets and trying to manage a brand at different stages in its career. And then I also got involved in sponsorships and really managed the sponsorship portfolio at Standard Bank, and that was amazing. Left there, went to Microsoft IT. So I've been in multiple industries, and then financial services in terms of Old Mutual and broad insurance and broader pieces. And here I am in telco, and really, getting involved in a business that's really transforming from being just a telecommunications company to a technology communications company, which is really, really exciting. And we have financial services, and we've got, the B2B side of it, our Vodacom business. And this is really where all the disruption is taking place in terms of the industry that we're in. And we're disrupting multiple industries and multiple categories and helping to drive the transformational change that's required across this beautiful continent of ours. So
and your love, sorry to interject, and your love for the continent, what I wanted to say is actually quite evident, and I love it. And we'll get to it just now.
Yeah.
We'll get to it just now, because I think you're one of the few people that wear the continent's heart on their sleeve, and it's quite evident all the time.
Yeah, I tell people that, the reason I'm so passionate, and I get asked, why are you so passionate about the continent? And I tell them that the most successful companies in the world solve problems. And they make a ton loads of money while doing that. And if you think about it, the continent of Africa has got the most problems. And therefore we represent the single largest opportunity to drive transformation and innovation, but also to create and have impact whilst making a lot of money. And I'd rather be here than anywhere else in the world, because what a place, what a time to help find solutions that can help to change people's lives across the continent. And I really like the vibrancy of the continent. Every country is different, the nuances, the insights, and really tapping into that in terms of really driving that innovation. But also, there are things happening on this continent that aren't happening anywhere else in the world. And I think we too often look to the world for best practice, and best practice is happening right here. People talk about paradigms. They talk about the power of technology to change Africa. But I say the power of Africa to influence and change technology. And if you think about one of the businesses in our portfolio, Safaricom and M-Pesa, and what we've done from a mobile money payments perspective to help alleviate a massive and deep issue for consumers, and really growing a business that really has grown and grown over the years. And so that's just one example of how what we're doing in mobile money payments on the continent, what we're doing in agriculture and technology in agriculture, how we're solving for medicine and solutions in medicine from a technology perspective, is not happening anywhere else in the world. And I think those stories need to be told more often. And by the way, storytelling comes from this continent of ours.
Yes.
And I think we've got a wonderful opportunity, and certainly I take all the opportunities to talk about the continent and share best practice and talk about the amazing things that are happening here. And just, I was in Cannes last year, and we hosted a African CMO. So we had Kenzie from NetBank, and really talking the African story at Cannes, because what's important is you can't have a global creative industry, the biggest platform, and Africa is not represented at those platforms. And therefore it's important for us to really go and democratize the African story and to shift the narrative that we are this continent that's always depicted the same in terms of dusty streets and all of those things. We all know that's absolutely not true.
That is so true, and I love that. And you mentioned how as Africans we can start solving the problems. I want to go to brands, and I think you alluded to Safaricom and M-Pesa. I want to go to African brands that have actually solved the African problem. And I want you to double click a bit. And tell us what the insight was or what the problem was, and how that brand or business actually solved that problem, and what the results after that were.
Sure. So I've had I've been truly blessed to work on amazing brands, and everywhere I've worked, there's been wonderful innovations. And so I'll give you 2 or 3 examples. So at Standard Bank, when I joined in 2004 looking after brand and sponsorships, our key challenge at the time was the brand was perceived as conservative, old, not relevant to young people, and certainly not seen as innovative as a brand. And from a sponsorship point of view, we thought, what better way to kind of really bring the brand closer to that youth market through our sponsorships. And so what we did is we partnered with SuperSport, as well as what was called the United Cricket Board at the time, and we came up with a 20 over format of the game. And we launched the first ever 20 over format of the game worldwide. It was called the Standard Bank Pro 20. And we broke all the rules and conventions of the game. we said, how can we make sure that we create a new concept called sportainment, the combination of sport and entertainment. We linked everything to broadcast and to the stadium in terms of the eventing. Every time there was a 4 or 6, there were dancing people and dancing ladies inside the stadiums. We had something called Dunker Hank, where we dunked hanks into water. We had jacuzzis. We put heart rate monitors on the batsmen so you could see their heart rate as the bowler was coming into bowl. And we really created this amazing product. We had live bands in the stadiums during the game. And in the final, we had 18,000 people at Wanderers. The brand shift in terms of our relevance to young people, because we positioned it about the beer, the braai, the boerewors, and the babes. And we said, you don't have to understand the game of cricket to want to come to a game. And that became the entry level proposition into cricket, and hopefully people migrated into one day and obviously into tests. But a year later, the ICC held the first T20 World Cup. They held it in South Africa, and they said, do what they do at the Standard Bank. And a year later, after that, the agency that helped us put all of this together went to India to launch the IPL.
Sure.
And therefore, a product that was launched in South Africa became this global success that we all see in the world today.
Crazy.
And having just left the board of Cricket South Africa now, one of the things that we did is launched the SA20, and there was a final this past Sunday. And you saw it was a sold out event for the final. And it just goes to show you how strong that product is that started in South Africa. So that's just one example. And then the shifts in terms of the brand perceptions amongst the youth market, we linked it to a product called the Achiever account. And sales of Achiever account went kind of through the roof. And it did amazing wonders to shift the overall perceptions of the bank. So that is really just one example. Another more recent example that I'm really proud of in my career at Old Mutual is, unlike South Africa, where vaccinations were for free, in other markets on the continent, people had to pay for vaccines. And so one of the first things, that we did, and we did a lot of work even in South Africa in terms of playing a role to support efforts in the fight against the pandemic. And we did things like, our real estate, our offices in Pinetown as vaccination sites to really vaccinate people. We launched something called Vaxi Taxi. We had mobile units going out into the rural parts and less accessible areas, because in suburbs, I think the coverage was pretty much very strong, but where the real issues were in far to reach places, and we had the Vaxi Taxi going out into those markets. But we also then launched vaccination campaigns in markets outside of South Africa, where we played an active role in getting vaccinations to people. And actually that makes business sense, right? Because it affects the business when we have to pay for death claims and all of these things. So if you get people vaccinated, you actually make the business actually makes or manages its finances. So you've got a real issue, humanitarian issue. And I talk about, when I started getting into the humanized growth thing, you can't drive humanized growth if there's no humans. And therefore, it was really important for the organization to step in and use its core business and core platform, which is insurance and serving lives, to really drive that uplift. And we really got, lots of credit and accolades in terms of that. And certainly at Vodacom, also playing a massive role in terms of the vaccination program and supporting the battle against the pandemic. But even more importantly, from a Vodacom perspective, one of the single biggest issues and single biggest shame we have is GBV in this country. And Vodacom certainly lent into that and is really, really doing what it can to support all victims of GBV, but also making sure that before that happens, we've got a whole ecosystem of really trying to get to the root cause. And through the work that we do both in education across schools, as well as teaching younger people about the impact of some of these and how we need to try and get to the root cause of some of these systemic issues in our society, I think we are really, really doing our part to really help in this fight against this scourge of gender-based violence in the country. And I think that we certainly, I think, will be, one of the people that will continue to drive that agenda in terms of this battle. So relevant issues, real issues, and what it takes is organizations and brands taking a leadership point of view and having a point of view on issues that are most important to them, and deciding to do something about it. And if you look at things like the Edelman Trust Barometer, year on year, there's been a decline in trust in other institutions like media. There's no trust in media, it's dropped. There's no trust in NGOs, definitely no trust in government. And where the trust is with business.
Yeah.
Consumers are looking now to business to help address social challenges and economic challenges. And we certainly need to lean into that. And I certainly think that Vodacom is one of the organizations that is leaning into its role. And we talk a lot about our purpose in terms of connecting for a better future and really trying to deliver on that promise. So it's not just, posters on walls. There has never been a more important moment than this for brands and businesses to deliver on their promise and their purpose. And I certainly think COVID was that moment that really said to us, are these things just, words, but how do we live them into practical reality and so it's actually people's lived experience in terms of what we say. So those are just some examples, I think, of brands that I think are going to be in the forefront of growth going forward. And the last thing I'll say is, it's also about brands that are able to connect what they do from a marketing point of view and connect it to how that drives impact and supporting the Sustainable Development Goals. The SDGs, for me, and Paul Polman, former Unilever CEO, says the SDGs are the blueprint. They're the business plan for the world. And I think that when you look at some of the challenges of the Sustainable Development Goals, Africa is fully at the heart of that. And people like Sanda Ojiambo at the UN Global Compact is really focused on Africa, amongst, obviously, her portfolio is the world, but Africa is a very important piece of the puzzle because a lot of the challenges are on the continent. And I think through some of the things, like the Business Leaders Coalition that has CEOs from organizations on the continent working together to really support things like climate change. The impact of climate change will be most hardest felt on the African continent. And so getting leaders from the continent to really step up and say, what are we going to do about this? And what's our point of view in terms of response to climate change is really, really important. And we saw leaders and Vodacom being a partner to the climate change COP27 in Egypt last year, and really pulling and making sure that we're galvanizing support from all other stakeholders to deal with this very important issue. So we've got a lot of challenges, a lot of issues, but I'm really excited about this wonderful opportunity that we have as brand activists and business leaders to really be in the forefront of that change and to step up.
And you mentioned humanization of brands here, and speaking to a purpose and delivering on what you actually stand for. And what I've found is other organizations are quite transformed in that space. And others are not. Others, we're dealing with the bottom line, whatever marketing is speaking about in terms of purpose and trying to humanize the brand, falls off. And you're in a leadership position currently, and you've been for a very long time. And I want to know, from the different roles that you've actually had, what are some of the things you feel are important from a marketing perspective to almost get the troops and rally them to this journey of humanizing brands in order to deliver on the value for the business?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I mean, certainly my experience has been one of the big trends is that a lot of organizations are kind of product-led. So if you look at the structure of the organizations and how they're set up, they're organized around products and organized around solutions and not necessarily organized around the customer. And that's a very important transformational shift to make. Because you've got to start with the customer insight and start with the trends and say, what are we solving for? Gotcha. And so, and that's important because you might have a solution, and the worse now, the challenges is now multiplied when you're operating in multiple markets. And so one example, if you're selling an funeral product in South Africa, it might be flying off the shelf, and how you market it is through the value proposition, which is we pay within 48 hours or 24 hours. But if you go to Nigeria, in Nigeria, half the population is Christian half the population is Muslim. And if you're a Christian in Nigeria and you pass away, they will not bury you for a minimum period of 4 months. So if you go there with the same logic and the same marketing of pay within 48 hours, it's irrelevant almost, because for that market, the cultural nuances are fundamentally different. And so you've got to start from the customer. And so I talk about customer-centric organizations kind of do three things. The first thing they say is where to play. Which markets are we going after? And what's the size of the commercial opportunity in those markets where we want to play? So it starts with externally, which markets, which customer segments are we going after? What are the insights and what we're trying to do? The second thing is what must we design and deliver for those markets where we want to play? And typically we start with what we've got. And as they say, if your only tool is a hammer, every problem becomes a nail. But if you start with which customers, what are the issues and pain points, and what's the size of the commercial opportunity, then say, what do we need to design and deliver for those markets? And then the third piece is how you take it to market. And typically marketing focuses on how you take it to market. But marketing's got to play an important role up front in helping to define the markets where we want to play. And we've got to have the insights and the intel in terms of which segments of consumer markets are growing, where's the growth opportunity coming from, and what are some of the shifts and trends in the marketplace. And so if you get those three pieces of the puzzle, I think you're in a very strong position to drive this customer-centric or human-centric change that I kind of speak about. So that's what I would say is the big thing, the product to customer shift. And then the second one is certainly about leaning into the insights, because today we have got so much data, so much insights, and how do you as a marketing leader kind of navigate through what all of this information is telling you? And I spoke yesterday about at Vodacom, we have so much insights on every single individual. We know exactly, because you have the phone, we know exactly what time you sleep, we know what time your alarm goes off, we know what time you wake up, we know which cell tower, we know where you live. We have so much information, but how do we use that information, taking into account data, privacy, and all of those things, to really drive personalized experiences for you that help to enable you in terms of what you're looking for in your life and where your aspirations are. So we've got to lean into that, but it does also mean that we've got to have new skills in terms of data analytics and translating that data and analytics into marketing strategies and plans that drive growth.
Gotcha. You mentioned the amount of data that you guys have and the importance of data in the space that we are in currently, and basically acquiring new skills in this day and age from a marketing perspective. There's so much data, Andisa. It's too much data. I work in a business where there's too much information is flying around and no one knows where to get it, what decisions to make with that, and what to do. And I know, I'm scared of your business because you guys know everything. There's two businesses I'm scared of, telcos, and I think businesses like Google, because they know everything. How have you used that power in order to make sure that you are effective in your communication, your solutions that you have, in the innovations that you bring into the market? Because data, with no usage of data, even though it's sitting there, it's useless. But how do you use that data to make the right decisions?
Yeah, well, you say that we have got so much power. The first piece is about how do you translate that power to be power to the consumer, and to empower the consumer. So that's important. But I would say you've got to be able to be clear on what you're trying to do and what you're trying to do with the data. And so being very clear about what are the metrics that you're trying to drive and what you're trying to understand. And then how do you organize the data? Because you can have so much that you're also taking stuff that you don't need. So being very clear about what pieces of data you need and what are the inputs into that. And I guess from my own perspective, we've got to really start shifting the role of the marketer from just being the person that does the ads.
Yes, please.
We've got to move from that. And that's why sometimes it doesn't help that the first thing that we talk about always is creative or the TV ad. It just reinforces that we are the nice picture t-shirt people. We've got to start talking the language of the business as an important piece and familiarize ourselves with how the business makes money. So many marketing leaders don't even fully comprehend how the business makes money. What are the levers of how the business makes money? What are the drivers in the marketplace around that? And so if you're not well versed, people, you can't demonstrate that you're fully empathetic to where the business is. And so the first thing is really being very clear and being aligned to where the organization is and speaking the language of the business. And if you understand the levers and the drivers, you then got to look at data and information and say, how can you use data that's helping you to add value into the drivers that the business requires in order to make money? And so how you organize that, how you then make sure that the whole ecosystem of your engine from an operational perspective is aligned to that. And what I mean by that is, how do you make sure that you build dashboards? Because nowadays there's dashboards that help you to track the progress that you're making on various metrics, and you visualize it in a certain way in terms of your performance. But it's also about making decisions in real time. And we don't have the luxury today of taking too long to make these decisions.
That's true.
And I had a wonderful, there was a wonderful talk just this week actually, where Busi Mavuso was quoting Colin Powell, who talks about the 40-70 approach. And basically it says, never make decisions with less than 40% of the information at your disposal, and never make decisions with more than 70% of information at your disposal.
Okay.
Less than 40%, you're just guessing, and more than 70%, you're just stalling. You take your analysis paralysis.
True.
So you've got to make quick decisions, fast decisions, and based on trends that you're seeing in the data. So it's not about understanding the detail, but what are the trends that the data is telling you in terms of making those core decisions. So the skills of what I call the magic of marketing, which is all the wonderful stuff that you see in the breakthrough innovations, with the logic. And the logic is the commercial acumen, the data and analytics. So how do you mix the magic with the logic to create a new type of marketer that is helping to drive business growth?
Okay, let's go to now the logic, because I think it's also important when you're speaking to people like CFOs. I think they're probably one of the people that don't like marketers. And in a business context, I always say when you look at the P&L, it's quite easy to see that if the business is not performing, let me just strip a bit of that A&P and I'll start making a bit of profit. How have you found that relationship? And maybe you can share some tips on what is that language that I need to be using when I'm speaking to the likes of a CFO or finance people, and how do I also make sure that they buy what the role of marketing is, which in essence is to drive business growth?
Yeah. So one of the greatest privileges we have as a marketing function is that our role cuts across every part of the organization. And I tell my team, by virtue of owning the brand, we touch and we have access to every place in this business. Go to the network teams, go to the IT teams, because it's the brand, right? And so how do we make sure that we're orchestrating and helping to organize enterprise-wide initiatives in the organization? And how do we start to talk and tailor our messaging and language for all C-suite executives?
Yes.
So when we talk to HR, it's about the employee value proposition and the employee brand.
Yeah.
When we talk to the technology team, ultimately all the technology is for the customer. And we should be custodians and champions and advocates for the consumer. When we talk to the product development people, how do we make sure that how we design our products is intuitive, is responsive, is simple to understand for the consumer? So we influence all of that. When we talk to, so we've got access to all areas of the business. And then from a finance perspective, what's important is to really be able to link what we're doing to commercial outcomes.
Sure.
And I spoke about the language of the business, understanding the drivers of the business, and then demonstrating how we're adding value. And so when you look at measures and indicators like the most valuable brands that use both financial KPIs as well as brand KPIs, and getting them involved in some of that in terms of them understanding, because that's important, right? Because it's part of how we talk about the inherent value of a business and a brand and how you can increase that in terms of its value over time. And in my previous life at Old Mutual, a big part of the work that we did to rebrand and to reposition the brand in terms of its listing back on the African continent, one of the outcomes of that work was we were then ranked as the most valuable insurer on the African continent.
Nice.
But we also made in 2020 number 76 on the global 100 insurance brands in the world. And being the only African insurer on that list affirmed that we're the most valuable insurance company. So
100%.
linking those things I think are important. And then I guess finally, thinking about which projects can help to demonstrate that you understand a growth. And so again, we've run another project called Project 2030, which is looking at growth opportunities between now and 2030. And I think those type of things, when you're starting to talk the language of growth, I think it resonates so well with chief financial officers. So we've got to really partner with them and really help them to see the value that we bring to organizations.
Okay, I love that. And as we try and slowly wind down, I think we've got 10 minutes left. I want to touch on the last two discussions.
Is it 10 minutes left already?
Yes.
Wow.
You see, when you're having fun, time flies. So the first one is I want to talk from a perspective of a leadership view now.
Yeah.
So maybe let's take a step back a little bit up from being technical around the marketing space. You're a leader. You've been a leader for some time now in your different roles. You've got big teams that you basically are accountable for. What are some of those traits that you think makes for great leaders to grow people, grow business, products, and brands?
Thanks for that. I think there's never been a more opportune moment than this as well, having come out of COVID. I think leadership is also about empathy. People are dealing with a lot and have been dealing with a lot. And leaders cannot continue to operate as though there's not all of this happening around us.
Sure.
And so the country, in terms of South Africa, is going through a lot. Unemployment, people are struggling, financial pressure, load shedding.
Yeah.
And we don't operate as leaders in a vacuum. And so being empathetic, checking in with your people, I think is really, really important, and making sure that people understand where you're trying to go and how you're trying to lead. So that empathetic leadership, I think is very clearly an important piece of the puzzle. In addition to that, the clarity of the vision of where you're going and being able to galvanize teams behind a common purpose, a common vision, is really, really important in demonstrating the proof points of the direction that you're wanting to take people.
Sure.
Especially in these difficult times, people need clarity and certainty in terms of where they're going. And then also being flexible, right? Because we have to be agile as leaders because things are changing all around us. The dynamic of working from home, working online and in person, that's really changed this new world of work. And I think we've got to embrace and be flexible to that. And then, as I say, one of the biggest things is being able to make decisions in the moment, 70-40, but also making the calls, because I think no decision is worse off than the wrong decision. And I think as leaders, we have to take responsibility for making decisions, but also taking our teams with us. And then I think the last two pieces will be around, cultural insight and being locked in to what's happening in the world around us from a cultural perspective. What are the shifts happening in the market? And secondly, having a global outlook. Because the world is also changing around us, and you've got to be able to connect what's happening around the world to our business, to our organizations, with our people. And I think you have a much more whole-brained leader in terms of those component parts. But it's a lot. And when you think about the volume of information that leaders are having to deal with, the complexity of issues that people are having to deal with, it definitely is not an easy environment to be in. But we've got to lean into our responsibility. We've got to lean into the burden or privilege of leadership. And secondly, I can't overemphasize the role of empathy. Soft is the new hard. All the soft skills are so important at this moment.
Yeah, soft is the new hard. I love that.
Absolutely.
So my last question. Yesterday I was privileged to sit in your panel discussion, Advertising Week Africa. And you mentioned a a beautiful story, which I would love for you to share, which was a life-changing experience for you. I want you to share with the world and everyone that will be watching here who was not part of Advertising Week Africa on that life-changing experience, and what it meant to you and how it has shaped you thus far.
Yeah, it's a really special one. In 2020, I was invited to join something called the IRG, the Institute for Real Growth. They have what they call the IRG 100. And so they invite 100 chief marketing officers from around the world to participate on an 8-month program. And it's chief marketing officer of Facebook worldwide, Unilever, global brands, Pepsi, Coca-Cola, from all around the world. And there were 3 of us from the continent of Africa. And every week we meet, for 3 hours every week. That we do assignments, we do presentations. And at the end of the 8 months, the 100 CMOs vote for the global CMO winner of this program. And these people voted me as the global CMO of this global program. And it was truly humbling to have been voted by peers with this honor, and something that I will certainly cherish for a very, very long time. But it also gave me inspiration in terms of the value that the continent of Africa and Africans can contribute in terms of the global creative space. And so I was the global champion, and one of the things that the IRG organized was this thing called the Regenerative Retreat.
Okay.
And those words fascinated me, Regenerative Retreat.
Yeah.
And it was to be held in Panama.
Yeah.
And so they invited 25 CMOs from around the world on this retreat in Panama. And we spent 5 days in the jungle of Panama in March last year.
Okay.
And 22 years ago, an American gentleman called Nathan Gray bought hectares and hectares of land in Panama, in the jungle. And literally there was nothing there, not one tree. And over the past 15 years, they've planted over 1.5 million trees. And today, it's a rainforest.
Sure.
And it rains every second afternoon. The animals have come back. And there's communities who live on the land. And it was really, really special. We had vegan food, no meat, for 5 days. We had yoga and meditation every morning at 6:30.
Yeah.
On the Thursday, we had a 6-hour silent hike, no talking. And what was the retreat about? So the retreat was about, they told us when we arrived on the Sunday that on Friday, before you leave, you will share your purpose in life with these 23 of us who eventually went there. You'll share your purpose in life, why you are on this earth. But you can't talk about your purpose if you haven't healed from your past. And so Monday and Tuesday, we spent the time healing from the past, and they took us through some really powerful exercises. Wednesday, where are you now in your life? And they do a whole thing of where you are in your life and to really center you. Thursday, 6-hour silent hike. I mean, if you can walk on someone's land for 6 hours, it gives you this, it's larger than Santon. And then in the evening, they gave you a framework. In fact, there were a few frameworks, the Ikigai model and a few others, to help you think about your purpose. Friday morning, you shared your draft purpose in small groups of 3, and people gave you feedback.
Yeah.
Andisa, I've only known you for a week, but it was really, really insightful. And then in the afternoon, you shared your purpose with everyone.
Beautiful.
It was life-changing. To be in a jungle, no technology, thinking about you in nature, and basically this gentleman has regenerated nature where there was nothing. There's now a rainforest, there's communities, the animals have come back, and it was just amazing. But the reason I tell the story is on the first day, on the Sunday when we arrived, and Nathan Gray was showing us the vastness of the land and everything, he said something that gave me my gift of the 3 words. And those 3 words are the gift of my life. And he said, I'm trying to create something worthy of emulation. I'm trying to create something worthy of emulation. And those three words stuck with me. Worthy of emulation. And I started thinking about this in the context of my life. Is my life worthy of emulation? Not in material ways, but when I go, will I have lived a life that's worthy of emulation? But also, I thought about it in the context of competition. There are businesses and brands that are doing amazing things that we should be just copying, adapting, emulating, and rolling out for the service and betterment of more people.
True.
But no, they're our competitor, this, that. And so this real concept has been something that's stuck with me. And I think if there's a parting shot from me, is I think all of us as brand leaders and activists need to strive for not just incremental competing for trivial differences in market share and product attributes. We should be thinking about how we can build brands that are worthy of emulation. Not just at an African level, but global businesses and brands need to be looking to the continent and say, there's a brand there. That Vodacom is doing things that are worthy of emulation. And that's certainly my aspiration for what we need to try and do and deliver in this organization. But I also think that a lot more brands on this beautiful continent can, and why not? We need to believe that we can build and create businesses and brands that are worthy of emulation, but also at a personal level, how do we think about what that means for us and the transformation we need to make in our personal lives?
I've got no further questions, sir. You've ended it well. Thank you for your time. We'll continue to build brands, as you say, that are worthy of emulation. And I think everyone heard that right now. Thank you.
I can't believe the hour's gone by so quickly. Thank you.
Smooth.
Thank you very much, and
Thank you, man.
thank you to everyone.
Cheers, guys.